I'd like to welcome you to a discussion of features that support the continuing calibration workflow. And the continuing calibration workflow purpose is to reuse the calibration standards. In other words, keep analyzing samples, just re-verify your existing, called initial calibration, with a CC injection. Once that continuing cal CC injection passes its acceptance criteria, then you're back to running samples. With the GC mass spectrometer and its retention time reproducibility, the calibration can hold for a long time. The Analyze menu offers calibration level commands. And this flexibility that's been added here supports continuing calibration workflow. The calibration choices allow both the flexibility of adjusting by compound, which has been around, but also now the flexibility of adjusting by level. Now that is essential for the continuing cal workflow. For example, you need to evaluate the continuing cal sample, the CC sample. And as you'll see in the demo, you need to replace that level so that you can evaluate the CC sample against the initial calibration curve. Another example of the calibration level feature is if you run into the situation that your existing calibration curve doesn't satisfy the dynamic range you need to run against, you can add another level to extend that dynamic range without rerunning all of your calibration samples. The available menu choices in the Analyze menu. I've been talking about adding a calibration. I've been talking about replacing the calibration level. You can also average calibration, of course, remove calibration, clear calibration, and you can do that not just by the compound granularity, which has been available for a while, but now you can also select the specific samples involved by level and adjust particular levels in the calibration table. Let me show you that now in the demo. Here I am to demonstrate the continuing calibration workflow. Now, this is the day after I've run my calibration standards. So I first need to get my calibration curve from yesterday. So I will open an existing batch, and that happens to be from yesterday. I'll use the demo, and that will load in the method, and I'll apply the method, and then quantitate, meaning use the existing calibration table. Let me stop here to make that clear. Analyze regenerates the calibration table from calibration samples in the batch, whereas quantitate, which is very useful for the continuing cal, uses the existing calibration table, does not affect it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to quantitate. Now notice that I've got a CC here. So I want to take that CC and evaluate it against the criteria of the existing calibration curve. But I've got to get it into that curve, so what I'm going to do here is add that. So I look at my Analyze menu and I see Add Calibration. So I'm going to assume that all of the samples have the same expected concentration, and I'll fill down. I'll select all of them, and then I'll go to Select Samples and take the continuing cal, and then watch the calibration table here. I will add that to the calibration table, and there is my continuing calibration sample. So I can quantitate again, of course, and I will see that I've got a calibration, initial calibration curve, as well as the continuing calibration that has come from this batch to evaluate against. Here I am today, and I've run my batch, including my continuing calibration verification standard, which is a mid-range standard that is analyzed in order to verify that the calibration of the analytical system is still acceptable. The frequency is either once every 10 samples or as indicated by the method. So what I'm going to do again is I'm going to get the method from yesterday. So I'll get it from yesterday, apply it, and then quantitate, which is F6. And you can see here is my continuing cal, but it's from yesterday. So I have the numbers I want, but I want to use the continuing cal to evaluate from today. So I'm going to need to replace that calibration level. So I'll select all the compounds and I'll pick CC. And if you watch very closely at that CC right there, you'll notice that it changes position because it's from today's batch. And now I can proceed to evaluate that against the acceptance criteria. And that's the overview of the continuing calibration workflow.